You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, People Centric leaders. We are super glad that you've joined us on this podcast today at the People Centric Podcast, because you know which experts to go to for good advice and which experts not to go through for good advice, right? You have judged your performance. You know that, my gosh, these people, they run a consulting firm, a very successful consulting firm, right? Based in the Midwest, right? We're wildly successful. Wouldn't you say, Diana? We're wildly successful. You can't just nod at the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, we're like the most successful.
We're incredibly successful, wildly successful podcast. Podcasters and consulting group work with lots and lots of different companies. Well, how many states did we figure out we work in?
32 states, but I think we're more successful consultants than we are podcasters. If you want the truth, I think we're better at consulting than we are at podcasting.
So even as you're listening to our podcast, because it's interesting, because I have had people stop me and say, like, tell me about your podcast. How do you produce it? What does it look like? And all that kind of stuff. I have had people ask me for advice on the podcast. And what you're saying is they should actually ask us for consulting work even more.
That is what I am 100% saying. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes more sense. All right. Well, so here's what episode we wanted to do today. And we're doing a little bit of a bit here, because what we want to talk a little bit about is, how do you really judge performance? How do you judge expertise on something? It turns out that we as humans aren't as good at that as we think we are, which is a definition of a bias, really. And it's a bias. Biases are things that we have in our brains that our brains oversimplify for us to help us to make quick decisions in the world. They do help us. Biases do help us sometimes to make quick decisions and not get overwhelmed with things, but sometimes they kind of hurt us. So we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, like, where do you go for expertise? Where do you go for people who really know what they're talking about? Where do you go for good advice on things? Do you go to your Facebook friends, or do you go to people who might know what they're talking about? ChatGPT, that's really smart. Yeah, go to AI. Ask AI the hardest questions and it will answer all of them for you. Or just go to Facebook and post it on there on a comment and just say, my boss is whack, right? Does everybody else think my boss is also whack? Is that still
How old are you? First of all, go to Facebook and post my boss is whack from start to finish. Like,
go to the chat room. Go to the chat room.
Get off the internet. You're done.
Get off the internet. It's over. It's over. Okay.
You're done.
Don't Karen me. I'm not, that's not me. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about, like, as a supervisor or manager, how do you judge people's performance? Like, if we're not really good at judging expertise, are we good at judging performance? What kinds of things can you do to help you judge performance of your employees? Because that's a key part of the management cycle. It's the very beginning of it. Are you judging your performance accurately? And then lastly, if you're an employee, we're going to talk about how you judge your bosses. Like, you might look at your bosses and go, boy, my boss is great or my boss is terrible. Guess what? You might be wrong. You might be wrong on that. So we're going to jump into that, and we've got our own experts. You can just trust me on this. We have our own experts on. Philip, you're an expert, right? Philip's on with us here. Philip?
I love the people. I'm around people all the time, and we have our moments here where we feel really expert, and then we have other moments where we think, ooh, maybe we missed it, but then we roll forward with other people. That's how it works. So yes,
well, that's true in our business, isn't it? Every time we think we know exactly what we're talking about in the business, but we get burned on it, don't we? That's a lot. I'm being very authentic and vulnerable right now for people on the podcast who say we run a consulting business, but every time we're like, man, we really know what we're doing on this stuff, then something else, a curveball comes, because people stuff are messy. Boy, it's messy.
The last time I was like, I got this, COVID hit. I was like, I will never say that again.
You learned your lesson. It's been 5 years since you really thought you got it. It's funny. We just watched the show The Producers over the weekend in the Herzog household. And I don't know, the song fits. If you've got it, flaunt it. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about a little bit in this, is that sometimes people feel like they've got it. And then they really do a lot of PR work to make that happen. And that is the difference between PR and performance. You might have a good persona. Does it hold up to snuff? And so, yeah, I love that we're talking about it. It's maybe the difference too. Any friend who's an attorney, we talk to them, and the law has this term, right? Any reasonable person would, and then there's always a description. That's how a lot of law is determined, right? If you go to litigation, a reasonable person would do X, Y, or Z. But in our work, we see a lot of the time, we might think we're reasonable, but we're people. And so by definition, we act very unreasonably throughout different times. And so I think that's why performance is so hard. You'd expect something, but maybe it's not always there. So how to reasonably go about judging performance, that's a very fun question.
Yeah, and what do you even get to see in terms of the performance, right? We talked a little bit about the example of like, if you're thinking about how to run a business, you would think, okay, Warren Buffett would be a good person to go to. And I like to call him Uncle Warren because they're both from Omaha. And, maybe he'll think, oh, Don must be a nephew and leave me a couple $1,000,000 just for something. But, and does he know a lot about business? Probably. I would guess he knows a lot about business. I would say, yes, that's true. Would he be an expert at starting up a small business or something? I would guess he probably isn't. Like, you have to be a little bit careful about, like, what does that person actually know or not know? And we see that example a lot. We also see the example a lot working with companies and organizations where you have a set of employees, and let's say I'm a supervisor and I have 10 employees, and they say, well, that employee is awesome. I really love that employee. And when we get into it and we watch it, it's really because that manager, that employee is the favorite of the managers because of the way they talk to the managers, because they kind of click. Like, they're really easy to talk to, they're really easy to communicate. But when you get behind the scenes, a lot of times there's some employee X who's out there who the manager did not pick up, who's actually like cranking out a ton of the work and doing a lot of the right things. They're just kind of doing it quietly and they're not getting noticed properly. Or we've even seen it where people who that employee who the person thinks is the rock star is actually the person that's destroying the team from the inside out. Like, we've seen all of those different things. So we're not really great at judging performance. And I think most people would agree with that if you took a step back and looked at it. So let's look at some different scenarios and maybe talk about how can you overcome this natural bias that you have. And you can't, by the way, something about biases, you can't just say you're overcoming it. You can't just say, well, I'm not biased. I've heard people say that. Well, I'm not biased. I'm not biased. If you are a human, you are biased. Bias does not mean that you're doing something wrong or something's broken within you. It's the way that we're hardwired. We oversimplify the world around us in order to understand it. And a bias is a quick judgment call. We need those quick judgment calls to survive and to do things. But when we continue to link onto those quick judgment calls, we make mistakes. So the first place I think let's explore this in is the hiring process when you go to hire new employees. Quick story, I was involved in an executive search. We've done quite a few of those for clients of ours. And in one, there was a candidate that came up that was really, really well known to everybody that was involved. And they thought, boy, this candidate is going to be the rock star. This is the person. I don't even know why we're interviewing everybody else. This is the person that's going to do this. And when we got into the interview, and Diana was part of this too, and saw the person, what did we hear from the person when we actually interviewed them? What happened?
Well, you mean like, what do you mean what happened? What do you mean what happened?
It's the idea, like when we were talking to this person who was a rock star,
Yeah.
and they got into the interview process, and we started talking to them about the job and their future.
Yeah, so they're still a rock star, right? It's not like they weren't great at what they did, but when we started talking to them, we realized what they did isn't what we needed. And so it was sort of this like, oh, they're amazing and they could do great things. And if I hired them, they would do really cool stuff. But I don't know that it's the stuff that I actually truly need. But there was still an appeal there. There was still like a desire to still hire them, like, because they were so good. And I still had the slight, like, do we do it? Do we do it anyway? Even though it was very clearly not what we needed.
Yeah, I like that distinction a lot because I think some of the biases, we think of somebody as either good or bad. You are an A player, you're a B player, a C player, you're an F player or whatever. And we want to hire A players. We only want A players on our team. But the truth is that it's not just about the person, it's also the person and the fit. to the job. If you hired me for a detailed booking job, I would be an F player on the team. I would not be good at that job. Don would not be good at that job. Diane, if we hired you for that job, I imagine you'd be better, much, much better at that job. Pretty darn good at that job, right? Like you'd be really good at that job.
Well, you're a player, but it wouldn't be the thing that, like, we both have A's in different areas, right? Like, I could apply for a job that you would apply for and it would not go well for me because I don't have the skills that you have, right? Like, and you don't have the skills that I have, and it's just two very different jobs.
Yeah. So how do we overcome that in interviewing? Sometimes we see people when they're interviewing, sometimes they're always looking for what they consider to be an A player. And especially if they use a term like, if let's say it's just Acme, we'll just call the company Acme. We'll go with the Looney Tunes, old Acme company, and say like, we're looking for an Acme kind of person. And they tend to look for a same kind of person. Why can that be a mistake? And how do you overcome that mistake?
Yeah, I think to your earlier example in that executive interview round where that person came in who was a rock star, but wasn't the fit you were looking for, the person who ended up being that fit was a little surprising. They were not what you expected for that Acme company. And I think because it's at first start, they maybe just had a different personality. And so I think when you're judging performance for someone you don't know, we really look at personality first. It's the whole winsome challenge, right? We're like, wow, I really do like you. That can be so distracting, as opposed to like, what are you actually going to do in the role? And I think some of the biggest disappointments when we work with executives, it's the letdown, whether it was someone who was hired or someone who the company was looking for, where they thought, man, I really thought, we might hear that. We thought you'd be the right fit, and this is why. When they say that, it's typically because like we liked them, they engaged with our team, they were awesome, and they focused so much on culture fit, which is important, but they then miss the questions or examples or the process to find out if they could actually do the things and have the traits that needed to get the job done. It'd be like having Don and Diana being like, I like both of you. You guys are awesome. But the role I would put Diana in would be very different than the role I'd put Don in. And if that doesn't come up in an interview, I could put Diana in a strategy role that's like 80% strategy and Don in an ops role that's 85% detail work. You'd be great people, but the team would not work well at all. And I think we find that happen all the time.
Yeah, and I like that you're going back to the personality of the person. So you know the strengths of the individual person, and you also know what you need within the role, right? We lay that out. Sometimes when we are helping companies to create a job description for something, we say, what do you need in that role? And they'll say, well, we need a highly detailed person that also is really innovative, has a high imagination. They're very influential in terms of people, and they're really inspiring when they talk to people, and they're a good public speaker, and they're really good at music, and they're also really athletic, and they're also really good. And they start listing all these requirements out. And in my head, I'm just like checking off, like there's nobody in the planet that has all of those different things. Like you're showing every dimension of any person that could ever possibly be created, instead of zeroing in really like on 2 or 3 really key traits that you're looking for that really drive success within that given role. And I think in that example of that interview that Diana and I were involved in, and you're right, Philip, the person that we ended up hiring for that role, who has been an absolute rock star in that position, was somebody that when she first came in, it was not obvious that they were going to be a rock star on it, but became obvious through the process because we knew the 2 or 3 things that we were really focused on, and that person we kept asking questions to focus on those 2 or 3 things, and that person really shined in that scenario. So I think when you're hiring, don't look for the unicorn. I think we look for the unicorn, the person who's perfect in everything. Look for the person that, like, do we even need somebody? I like to use the example of somebody that you like in a personality. Sometimes you don't need somebody that's personable. You might not need somebody that's really great in an interview, like who thinks on their feet. You might not need somebody that can do that. You might need somebody that thinks, like, if you're hiring somebody for a data job, that's really good at analyzing data and really thinking through like data stuff, they might not be great in an interview just naturally as a person, but they might be really great at analyzing data. So you want to be careful about what the characteristics are.
Well, and it strikes me, we're talking about how you judge performance, right? And I recently had a coaching call with someone who had inherited a team. It's a new leader, inherited the team. And she said, they're just really bad at their jobs. And I said, oh, how do you, like, what have you seen? And she was like, well, I haven't seen anything. And I was like, okay, that is bad, right? That sounds bad. They should be producing something. But have you asked for something? And do you know what they're usually used to producing? Like, have you checked on those things? And she kind of was like, no, not really, right? Like, and so I said to her, I said, you need to go and say, hey, what do you think your job is? What are you working on? And then you need to write out what you think their job is and what you want them working on. And you need to compare those two things and then decide, is this person working on what I think they should be working on? And can they do the things that I need them to be doing? And those are two different things. But you can't just be like, well, they're not doing what I want them to do, so they're bad at their job. Yeah. Maybe you didn't tell them what you actually want them to do.
Yeah, so you're getting down to like really basic things, but things that we see break down a lot. So if I am a manager of employees, which I am, and my team does not have job descriptions, and I mean, and even if the job description exists, but exists in a file cabinet, nobody knows what those things are, how am I judging performance, right? Especially if everybody on my team does different jobs. Like I need to be able to create some kind of a standard for myself that I look back to. I say, this is what a good person in this job looks like, and then match what the person's actual performance is versus that standard to really truly be able to understand a person's performance or not, which is tricky. That's hard to do, but we see that break down a lot because we see a lot of times, I mean, job descriptions are kind of rare. It's not rare that they have the job descriptions. It's really rare that people know what their job description is, and the job description is well written and not written in a 15-page format that ends with "and other duties as assigned," right? That narrows it down.
And rare that it's looked at, right? Like, I don't know, when was the last time you looked at your job description, and are you doing those things? And like, everyone's job changes over time. You get more things put on, people leave, you take on different projects and responsibilities. And I don't think enough times we stop and say, are we judging this person based on the thing that we really should be judging them on? And I think a lot of people don't know, what am I being judged on? What does winning look like? I'm doing what I think I should be doing. And that there's a big difference between what people think they should be doing and then what the managers think they should be doing and then what they're being judged on.
Yeah. I like that. It's funny that you brought up that example today, Diana, because like this afternoon, you and I have our check-in that we do quarterly. And I actually have, like, we're going over your job description today. Like, it's one of the things that we're doing. Like, we're going to go over your job description and make sure, like, is this still accurate? Does this still reflect what we're doing? Does this still reflect what success looks like on it? And that's
Dawn, we don't have my check-in today because you didn't invite me to it.
I didn't invite you to it again? I just moved the existing one over? Okay, so this is why I'm not good at the detailed stuff. This is why
I'll schedule our check-in.
You schedule a check-in. I was so proud of myself because I had the documentation all like ready to go this time.
When you said it, I instantly was like, uh-oh, I have a meeting with Ashley this afternoon. I don't have a meeting with you.
Here's a pro tip for all of you managers out there. If you have a check-in process, you should invite your other person to it. You should. If you're in the check-in by yourself, you're doing something wrong. Oh my gosh. Okay, well that's funny.
I'll fix it. Oh my gosh.
Okay,
that's so funny.
That.
Anyway.
Philip, jump in here and save us both on this. What other insights do you have here?
You know, I can attest. What I love is that your calendars have both of these very important meetings happening at the same time. And maybe we all just need more performance management check-ins without the other person there. Maybe if more leaders did that, you could talk to yourself, go through, imagine what it would be. But, you know, the thing, Don, that you said that actually is super important, and not to beat yourself up too much, right? You actually were prepared. You were prepared for this meeting while it would have been just you. Taking the time to actually step back just a little bit. I think that's what we tell people. One of the biggest challenges with performance is that it almost feels like sludge. You just kind of like go through the motions, and maybe you have a meeting and you get with that person and they're there, and in your mind you think, yeah, I know how they're doing. I have all that information in my mind, in my head. I think you're great. Or there was this problem this week. You yelled at this person, or you didn't get this project done on time. And you'll talk about that one thing. But good performance for the ones giving it and getting it is really looking back at that bigger picture.
Well,
with
it's
some neat.
amazing. It is amazing when you take that minute, which like I have, and the one little detail of inviting the other person to the meeting. This one little detail, one little thing.
Totally.
I miss that. Yeah, on very publicly in front of our thousands of listeners on this podcast. Great. So glad. We could edit this out, but I know we're not going to either. I know that's not what's going to happen. But you're right, Philip, looking at that detail of like what the performance is, it does make me check for a second of saying like, okay, wait a second, like Diana is supposed to be running operations and making sure our financial stuff's done and all that stuff. How do I really know if she's doing a good job of doing that? Like, how do I really know that? Like, because I assume she's doing a good job of it, but do I really know she's doing a good job? And so every once in a while, like it reminds me I need to have a conversation like with our accountant and say, by the way, hey, you have regular meetings with Diana. Are you getting all the information you need on a regular basis? What do you see from your outside? Or do you feel like everything's going well? Or get other feedback from other people on our team and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to be meeting with Diana later. Or how are your thoughts on how that's working? Or like if it's an interaction, if you're like in a hospital and you have somebody who's working with patients on the floor, are you walking the floor and watching how people are working? Like you can't just assume somebody's doing a good job. You have to take some time as a manager and think, okay, what's the person? How am I judging that person's success? And then how do I collect some data? That doesn't mean I'm standing over your shoulder watching every interaction, but how do I drop in every once in a while and check and see how things are going and get some feedback so that what I think is happening is really happening? That's a tricky thing to do. So you have to be prepared for that. I like that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about too how we judge our managers' performance, because we talked about how we judge our employees' performance. Where does that work or not work really well? Is it hard to judge a manager's performance? Because it's when we talk to employees and say, hey, give us feedback about your manager, most of the time they're pretty quick to tell us what they think about their manager. So it feels like they're getting a lot of data maybe, but are they? What's that look like?
Oh man, I think this is a really hard one because like you said, people either really love their manager or really don't like their manager. I very rarely are people like indifferent. Either, yeah, they're great or no, they're awful. And I think the ones that are great, a lot of times I hear they're great because they say things like, well, they communicate well and I always know what's going on and they get me what I need on time and they set realistic deadlines, right? Those types of things are really what people need from their manager, but it might not be all of the manager's job, right? The manager has an extra set of jobs that they have to do for the executives or for the company or for their bosses, right? And a lot of times we don't see that as the employee. We don't measure that as the employee, right? I don't know if Don is getting the accountant what the accountant needs. I don't know if I don't know. I'm scrambling for examples, but I don't know, right? I don't know if the manager is really doing their whole job. I only know if they're getting me what I need. And I think it's hard to judge a manager on some of those things. And then conversely, the people who are like, oh, I really don't like my manager. It's a lot of times because there's a perceived injustice of some sort. They didn't do this or they did this to me. And I think we forget that like managers are just people too. And if you feel slighted or you feel like they're not doing something, you need to ask them. And they can't tell you everything. So there's like this weird black box that some things go into as a manager. And there's this like, disorienting communication and they're above you. So you can't ask all the questions you want to ask and they can't tell you all the things they might want to tell you. So it's just like a strange interaction and dynamic. And so it's hard to judge your manager accurately. It's easy to judge them, hard to judge accurately.
Yeah. I'm curious, Philip, you work with for several different people. I'm not asking you to judge your current manager or anybody like that, but I'm just thinking about like what your perspective is on how you look at a manager and how you judge their performance. What are you looking for?
really, I just really want to make sure, ironically, that I enjoy or trust the person. And I think I enjoy trusting someone. Maybe that's what I want to look at. I think why it's hard to sometimes know all the things a manager is or isn't doing. That's like a mental load that I think managers have with their team too. But for me, I enjoy trusting someone. I think we all would say trust is used a lot, but I measure, maybe this sounds strange, right? But how easy is it for me to trust them? And I think maybe we hear the phrase, I want someone who's got my back. I'm like, I kind of assume that if I'm on your team, my success requires your success and vice versa. But do you walk in a room and you're unpredictably frustrated all the time? Like, before I ask you a question, how often do I have to check your emotional and mental state before I come to you? Right? Or in a meeting, do I know what we're meeting about? Or do you call a lot of wild, unexpected meetings? I had a leader years and years and years ago during an internship who was great with me. We had incredible rapport. But the team around me walked on eggshells with this person because they never knew when they would literally fly off the handle. And that's something I always remembered after that. Again, I think I managed that relationship really well, and that I only ever approached them at the right time. But how inefficient it was that I was one of the only people in that office that approached at the right time. Lots of extra work put into coming at the wrong time. So I think a simple way to say that is, I really like a leader that has the emotional intelligence to know how to lead that team. And that makes trusting them a lot easier, because they can say the right thing at the right time, or at least ask questions about how to do it later. That's simply what I look for as the primary. Good at the job, skill sets, building a great team, but I want to enjoy trusting them and not make it an obligation. Like, I can trust on trusting them.
Yeah, I love that, Philip. I think that one of the things that I imagine a lot of the managers who are listening to that go like, well, how would I know if I'm earning that or not, or how I'm earning that or not? And we do work with some managers who can do things like 360 assessments, where you get feedback from the people that work around you in terms of your assessment. And that collective feedback tends to be fairly insightful. Individual feedback is a little trickier in terms of how individual people give you, because why do I trust you? What does that look like? How do you build that? What's the emotional intelligence piece? Are they even doing a good job in their job that you, like Diana said, it's not related to what you do, right? Because your manager has jobs that you don't have, that you're not aware of, that they probably even are responsible for, that are hard not to judge on it. But yeah, we see a lot of employees who we will work with a manager and we'll say, well, that's a pretty good manager. Like, they're doing a pretty good job. And sometimes we'll see people get underneath them and say like, well, they're terrible. And sometimes it's because one of the most common things they'll share is, you have employee A and you have employee B, and you have employee A who's struggling with employee B, and employee B is not doing their job. And employee A is frustrated with the leader because they're not confronting employee B, when the leader actually is talking to employee B, but they don't tell employee A about it, right? That happens a lot. Like, we see that example come up an awful lot. If you think about it, employee, your manager is not going to go to your team. They should not go to your team and say, by the way, I'm working with employee B right now. I have talked to them 3 times about this. I put them on a performance plan. We're going, here's all the things that I'm doing to deal with that situation. You will not know that stuff. You should not know that stuff. And a good manager, you really shouldn't know that it's going on. So sometimes it feels like your manager's not doing anything when they are doing something. It's just that you don't know what it is that they're doing. And that can kind of threaten, Philip, like what you were talking about, the building trust piece. Because you can say part of that trust might be like, well, you're going to protect me from other members of my team, right? And it's like, well, yeah, I am, but you're not seeing it. That's a tricky part of the manager. And we've talked to a lot of managers, and managers struggle with that and say, like, I want to go to my team and say, look, I've talked to that person a dozen times. I don't like working with them either. I'm trying to deal with this so that we can move on. And it's hard to deal with that.
I was going to say one thing maybe to add to that, especially earlier in my career, it's been fairly straightforward to be a favorite team member. That's kind of natural for me, not to brag, I'm going to lose favorite points now.
You're definitely my favorite. So
that's it. I know. I mean, don't let Brock hear that. We know Brock's really your favorite.
He's, not on payroll. So
that's right. Okay. That's it. That's
and for the longtime listeners, Brock is Diana's dog.
Dog. Yeah. I know.
Who is half brothers with Philip's dog.
Yeah. We're related. Philip and I, our families are related.
Diana is my dog's fairy godmother. It's a very official thing, it is. It is.
Yeah.
But why it's so helpful to think of. There was a nervousness earlier in my career. If I was a favorite, that favor is something you can gain or you can lose. And if I heard leaders say to me, "Hey, you're a high performer. You don't have to worry about X, Y, Z," especially if they're complaining about someone else. That's always later I thought, oh, well, I will be so careful now, right? Because now I know you do things really differently with everyone. And to your point, Don, performance then really came to, I was a high performer, but I probably wasn't coached in other areas because they were busy focusing on this person they really didn't like. And well, Philip's not doing that annoying thing that other person does, as opposed to like, where can I grow and build? And so your check-ins examples are great because our whole team does them. They look different for all of us in both our different fits, different skill sets that we have. But the cool thing with our team and something that helps all of us stay aligned and growing is that we all have them with our leaders. And then our leaders at People Centric are really good at asking for that too. And People Centric styled leaders we see beyond our own company, I think, are leaders who really mindfully navigate that organizational need they have. You may not be able to say every organizational need that is present to your whole team, but then they also know their people have needs too. And working in that space where those two need to meet, our principles help do that really well.
I love that. I'm a big college football fan, as both of you know, and neither one of you are big college football fans, I believe, but that's okay. I'll use this example. Indiana is going to be playing for the national championship, which is the big game. Indiana is like one of the worst football teams in the history of college football historically. But this year they have the best team. And if you look at the average rating of the players, because, and today it's such a huge thing where you rate all the players. All the players are rated and they get rankings and all that stuff. They played Oregon recently. Oregon is ranked like 5th in terms of player talent. They're like ranked 5th in the country. Indiana is ranked like 74th in terms of talent in the country. And Indiana just absolutely crushed Oregon on the field. Like they didn't just beat Oregon, they beat them badly. So it kind of shows a little bit that there's something beyond, like Philip, what you were talking about, that performance of an employee may not match their potential, right? So also as a manager, you might be judging their performance, but their performance might also be related to the fact that maybe you haven't triggered something that's helped them with their performance. Maybe, that's why we train managers to help coach and mentor and work with somebody. So if you have somebody that's got a talent, they're trying to figure out how to use that talent, that you're helping them to unleash that talent. You're helping them to open that up. And we've seen lots of employees who have come in and really their managers would describe them as B players. And then we help engage them and find help them tweak their job just a little bit, not even change roles, but just tweak how they show up or overcome something that they see or just a barrier or something that's out there. And then they become A+ players and they become rock stars in their roles. So there is something as a manager that it's not just about judging the employee's performance. It's also judging your own performance as a manager and judging the employee's performance to understand that, right? Good coaches get great players. They try to put their players in the right position to be successful. So, all right. Well, we wanted to share that with you because we just keep seeing people talk about performance and they get really into it. And so big thing that we often say this about communication, that effective communication can only happen when you know that you might be wrong. And I think that's also true when you're communicating performance to somebody. You need to be aware that your judgment of performance for an employee or for a manager or for a coworker or somebody else might not be totally correct. You might be a little bit off in terms of what you're seeing. It reminds me a little bit, I recently on LinkedIn posted a picture of a pizza that I made, and it was a frozen pizza, and I opened it up and it was a pepperoni pizza, and there were like 7 slices of pepperoni on the entire pizza, like 7 pieces of pepperoni on it. And I was just like, that's barely a pepperoni pizza. There's like one pepperoni per slice if I cut this thing up. Like, this is pathetic. And I was all mad and I ate the pizza. I cooked it up. I ate it anyway, right? It's still pizza, whatever. It's a frozen pizza. My bar was set low.
I was going to say, you bought that cheap college frozen pizza.
I did buy it. It was a relatively cheaper pizza. Yeah. But I was still sitting there thinking, eating the pizza. I'm like, man, they should really watch that, and they should do better quality checks, and they should do all these other things. And I was like, the performance of them was not very good. The store that I bought it from probably should just, it was in a clear wrapper. They should have just looked at the thing. Like, why didn't they look at it and they could see like it doesn't have hardly any pepperoni on it and all these other things. And then I went back to the kitchen after watching a movie or something, and I went to clean up everything, and I went to take the wrapper to throw it away. And I realized that in my haste to unwrap the paper, when I pulled the paper back, I peeled off about 3/4 of the pepperoni right off the top of the pizza, and it was all like wrapped up in the wrapper itself. So I realized that suddenly the performance issue was mine. So everyone, be careful. Sometimes you might think that you know something about something in performance wise, and you might not be entirely accurate on how that performance is.
This is such a great story of just like, I'm trying to like use the analogy of like, sometimes you peel back the paper and what you see is not actually all that you got.
It's a good almost, or it's almost like me judging Diana for not showing up for a check-in this afternoon that she didn't know she had because I forgot to invite her.
Well, clearly Diana's job is to read your mind, so that still would have been her problem.
My fault.
She would have been the pepperoni bandit in that situation. You know, that's signed, sealed, delivered.
Well, and the really puzzling thing, just for our listeners too, to really confess, that's the second time in a row that's happened. And I had to figure out, why is that the second time in a row that's happened? Because it's a recurring invite. I set a recurring quarterly invite on my calendar, which was great. And I forgot to invite Diana to it. So now every quarter we were going to have a meeting that Diana didn't know about. But the second time I figured out that it was recurring and I deleted it, and Diana's going to help me get one on there that she's actually invited to.
I was just going to say the mystery deepens because I just searched for it and couldn't find it.
Well, I just deleted it.
Okay.
We're not doing our check-ins.
There we go. We're going to get this. We're going to get this worked out, and I will get it.
You're probably doing fine. You're probably doing fine. It's just fine.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. And by the way, too, we didn't talk about this, but just a little add-on bonus thing. When you give your employees meaningful, thoughtful feedback because you looked into it, it's a lot better feedback to give. Like we talk about that in the management cycle. If you just tell somebody, oh, I'm sure you're doing a good job and I'm not really looking at what you're doing, that's one of the most demotivational things you can say to an employee or to somebody else. So like you actually digging into it and saying, hey, by the way, I talked with our accountant, Diana. She said you've got one of the most organized like AR, AP processes that she's ever seen, and we're rock stars and we're just way on top of it. And she wished that everybody had somebody like you working for them. You're going to be like, wow, he checked up on me. That means my job's important. That means that this is what I'm doing is right on. And that's meaningful versus me just saying, I think you're doing fine. I don't know. I don't know what your job is, right? That doesn't sound very good. So,
yeah. The thing that keeps striking me in this conversation is that humans are not good at judging anything, right? There's studies that have come out that like, oh, most people think 90% of people think they're good at judging if you're lying to them, when actually it's like 54% of people can tell. Like it's average. Half of people can tell. It's a crapshoot. Same with like, are you a good judge of character? It's like 87% people think they are, and it's really 30% actually are, right? And I just think that it just goes to show you that we are constantly overestimating our abilities to judge others. And I think that we should just like assume that we can't and do the prep and do the work, like Don was saying, check into it, look at it, check on the things that are supposed to be done, and actually look into the work that's being done.
Perfectly said. Very well summed up. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's episode, and make sure, if you love our performance, give us some feedback. We think we're awesome, and we don't hear from you. We don't know, but if you think we're awesome, give us some feedback. If you don't think we're awesome, keep it to yourselves. We don't care. We don't want to hear from you. No, I'm just kidding. No, give us some feedback. If you think we could do better, or if there's a topic you'd love to hear from us, reach out and let us know. But thanks for joining us on the People Centric Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.